Now, it's 11 minutes past 5. President Trump has sacked his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who's been replaced by the director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo. The State Department said Mr. Tillerson had not spoken in person to the president and was unaware of the reason for his sacking. Speaking to reporters as he prepared to board a helicopter in Washington, Mr. Trump said that he and his former Secretary of State, now Mr. Tillerson, had not seen eye to eye on a number of issues, particularly the deal with Iran to limit its nuclear program.
I'm really at a point where we're getting very close to having the cabinet and other things that I want. But I think Mike Pompeo will be a truly great Secretary of State. I have total confidence in him. And as far as Rex Tillerson is concerned, I very much appreciate his commitment and his service, and I wish him well. He's a good man. Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess he felt it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently. So we were not really thinking the same. With Mike Pompeo, we have a very similar thought process. I think it's going to go very well. Rex is a very good man. I like Rex a lot. I really appreciate his commitment and his service. And I'll be speaking to Rex over a long period of time.
The President speaking a short while ago. So several things raised there, of course, not just the reasons for the sacking. President there saying that they'd had disagreements, not least on the Iran, the nuclear limitations deal in Iran, but also questions about how the sacking was achieved, because, as we understand it, Mr. Tillerson has not had a proper explanation and indeed hasn't spoken directly to the president either. So let's go straight to Washington and talk to our correspondent there, Gary O'Donoghue. What's been said about it, Gary? And, you know, let's face it, we've discussed this in the past. There'd been lots of rumours that this was about to happen at some point.
Yes, it's not unexpected in itself, but if you'll forgive us a moment on the processology of it, that is quite extraordinary in this case, because it seems that Rex Tillerson only discovered his departure as Secretary of State through Donald Trump's tweet this morning. Shortly after that, an Undersecretary of State, Steve Goldstein, at the State Department issued a statement saying that Mr. Tillerson had every intention of staying, was unaware of the reason for his departure, and hadn't spoken to the president. Guess what? Mr. Goldstein has just been sacked as well. So here we have it. Rex Tillerson is out. He, of course, yesterday very clearly sided with the British authorities when it comes to the attack in Salisbury, pointing the finger at the Russians, something the White House had notably significantly dodged much earlier on. There have been other clashes between the two men. You'll remember, of course, Hugh, that Rex Tillerson refused to directly deny that he'd called the president a something moron. And, of course, on North Korea, we've got this extraordinary situation where months ago, the president told Rex Tillerson publicly again that he was wasting his time with North Korea, and yet the president is on the verge of meeting Kim Jong-un by the end of May. So, all in all, it's quite a saga, but it does seem that the president does now have the man he really trusts, Mike Pompeo from the CIA, as his Secretary of State in his cabinet.
Can we talk about that? Gary? Because Mike Pompeo, obviously a very different kind of person, brings a different kind of ideology as well, if you like. What can we expect?
Well, he's the person, of course, that largely, pretty much daily, does the president's briefing. So they've got very close. They have a similar worldview, particularly on things like Iran. Mike Pompeo is very strong. He's very strong on things like Guantanamo Bay and keeping that open, which is, of course, something the president has done. And also he has a robust view on things like some of the techniques that the CIA used to use in terms of waterboarding and things like that. It doesn't use anymore, but the president has been very focused on saying that he doesn't think things like that are torture whatsoever. So I think there is a certain common world view. His replacement at the CIA is his number two, is the first woman to become the replacement, to become the director of the CIA. So that really is a moment in time. But she's not without controversy either, Gina Haspel. She was partly responsible for the setting up of these so-called black sites that the CIA had in the early 2000s in places like Thailand and Poland, where there was interrogation done on foreign soil of suspects connected to Al-Qaeda. So there's some rocky confirmation hearings to come, I think, in the Senate.
And just a final point, Gary, if I may, the appointment of Mr. Pompeo, given that Mr. Tillerson has been seen to be incredibly close and supportive of the UK, are we likely to see any change there?
Well, that's an interesting one. I don't think there's been any particular sign that Mike Pompeo is hostile to the UK. Of course, he will understand that the CIA and the British Foreign Secret Intelligence Service does work very closely together. He will have an understanding of the importance of that relationship in both directions. So that augurs well, I guess, in some particular sense. It will be interesting to see his first comments on whether or not he supports Mr. Tillerson's view that Russia was responsible for the Salisbury attack. And I'm sure that's one of the first things when he makes a public appearance he's going to be asked.
Gary, once again, thanks very much. Gary O'Donoghue with the latest thoughts there in Washington after the sacking of Rex Tillerson. 17 minutes past 5.